Some of the best people I've hired have no experience in sales. And I'm a firm believer that there's some things that you were just naturally inclined for, you were born with.
Chelsea Bedard, a whiz at sales.
I was the top sales rep in the Western United States.
How much in sales do you think you've made?
Combined companies probably hovering around the 300 million mark. I don't want a sales rep that somebody says, oh, we're not interested right now. And they go, okay, talk to you later. Like, that's not who I want to hire. I want you to find any way possible to get into an account. You have to do things that are outside the box and unique to get people to remember you. Just submitting a resume, unless you know someone, it's not going to get you too far. If they're a natural person that gets up every single day and gets pushed down and wants to pop back up and figure out, how do I run after this again? That's the kind of person that I'm looking for.
What tips would you give to people who are trying to get a job in the corporate tech world?
Honestly,
welcome to this week's episode of Vinny. With me in the studio today is Chelsea Bedard, a dear friend of mine who is a whiz at sales. So this week, we're going to take the time to help you learn how to grow your business, how to build sales teams, how to make a lot of money in the sales world. Chelsea, welcome to the studio.
thanks, Ben.
Before we go into your background, how much in sales do you think you've made over the past decade in this category?
Combined companies probably hovering around the 300 million mark.
So $300 million. Like, by just regular valuation standards in the US, you've probably created over $1 billion worth of enterprise value, which is pretty impressive.
I would agree.
So tell us how you got there.
So I started very early, straight out of college. I got lucky. I fell right into tech, which I think if anybody's looking for where do you start, it's a good place to get your feet wet. I was always hungry of like, how do I get to the next level? And I got to that place by really focusing on what other people didn't want to dive into. So as a sales rep, the accounts that were hard or difficult, that's what I focused on. I grew from doing kind of commercial mid-market sales to getting into more of the enterprise side of things, working with Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, and that's where I think I really found my groove. I ended up jumping out of the enterprise tech world, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
I always had this thing in my head of, can I cut it in the startup world? I worked for big companies like Hewlett Packard. I worked for a company called EMC. They were acquired by Dell for $70 billion. So none of these are, small. And there was always something in my head of like, I can cut it in the corporate world, but can I cut it in the startup world? So I, middle of 2020, made the jump and joined a couple of friends that were starting a cannabis beverage company called Can. And I grew that company 3x the revenue year over year. Valuation I can't speak about publicly, but we've raised over 50 million. And then after some soul searching, I decided I want to get back into the tech space. So I've been last 5 months, I've been with a company called Vast Data, really focusing on the AI space and growing and building a sales team there for them.
Great. Well, thank you. That's fantastic. So you got a whole, you've run the gamut on getting into and out of tech, and you've probably learned a lot. So I'd love to just understand, what is it that you do? When someone brings you into a company, what are they expecting from you?
I mean, it depends. So in the particular role that I'm in now, it's really about how do we scale the business and specifically scale teams. So for me, what that looks like, it's hiring great people first and foremost, and then developing the deepest relationships I can with the largest potential clients. So having a great relationship with them and getting them to trust me and my team is really what's helped me be successful, but also hiring the right people. That's a big part of it.
Hiring is critical to building a company. And so one of the problems I've always had with hiring and salespeople is salespeople present really well in interviews.
Yeah.
But once they get on the job, it's very, very hard to see how the follow through progresses. And I say hard, it's just like it's difficult because they've sold themselves, they're coming in, and then you expect them to hit the ground running, but you also want to give them enough time.
Mm-hmm.
How do you balance that out? And as an example, like I always use examples of people who've worked with me before. When they come in, they start developing the sales funnel, the pipeline, and like you want to give them time, But, you look at this stuff and say, well, the sales cycle shouldn't be more than X number of weeks.
hmm
Like, do you have a model for how you think about new people joining a company and how to evaluate them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, from my experience, it's a little bit different when I've been with larger companies versus, starting Can. The revolving door as it relates to salespeople is the turnover is much, much higher than your
Hmm.
traditional finance role or HR or even C-suite. It's very, very high. So I went through a lot of turnover at Can, and that's really hard for the business because, to your
Mm.
point, it takes a certain amount of time to build trust and rapport, build a pipeline, be able to get you to the next level. So what I'm looking for people is I need to know what their experience has been. And some of the best people I've hired have no experience in sales. And I'm a firm believer that there's some things that you were just naturally inclined for. You were born with. You can
Mm.
have a conversation with, a fly. You can relate to somebody on a personal level. I think something that's very overlooked a lot of times is detail, focus on detail and follow up. That for me has always been my kind of sweet spot of separating me from other people, the organizational aspect. So when I'm evaluating people and having these conversations in interviews, I want references. That's a big part of it. I want to understand who they are and how they tick. Like if they're a natural person that gets up every single day and gets pushed down and wants to pop back up and figure out, how do I run after this again? That's the kind of person that I'm looking for. The other thing that I'm looking for is it's the detail and the follow up. And I mentioned that before, but it's simple. But like after I have an interview with someone, if somebody doesn't send me a follow up email, it's a huge red flag.
Hmm.
If if they haven't done their due diligence on what I'm hiring for and don't have clear questions to ask, also a huge red flag. And if they don't have references and people that are willing to say, "Hey, I know this person, they're amazing," that's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
Um, those
Okay.
are main things.
No, that's great. The follow-up thing is, you're right. It's a huge red flag.
Simple.
It's a simple thing.
Takes 2 seconds.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your time. Had a great conversation.
Yes, exactly. And you'd be surprised how many people actually just
Yeah,
do it. I can understand when people are getting interviewed by a whole bunch of companies simultaneously, but like the salesperson that you hire needs to be able to juggle multiple things.
correct.
So there's no excuse really
No.
for that. What tips would you give to people who are trying to get a job in the corporate tech world in sales? And let's just say it's entry level. They're starting off. Maybe they're just graduated from college. They're looking to build a career for themselves. How would you advise them to get into sales?
Grit and tenacity goes a long way. I think, you know, not being afraid to call high and reach out to somebody inside of an organization and say, "Hey, I'm really interested in joining XYZ company. Do you have any advice for me?" People love to give advice. And I've gotten people that have come to me for that. And I'm like, that's interesting. Like it takes some guts to cold reach out to somebody and get them to give you a reference or have a conversation with
Mm.
you. And there's people that I've seen their resumes and I'm like, you don't really have the background particular that I'm looking for, but the follow up or reaching out to me and
Mm.
saying, "Hey, I know that you're looking for this. This is how I think I may align." I give them a shot. And then in
Mm.
that conversation, you've got to nail it. You have to make sure that you're connecting with that person personally. You're doing that follow up with them. You're asking about the next steps. I think sometimes when I interview people, I've had this happen only a handful of times, and I think it's a bit of a baller move. But the main question I love to hear from someone is there anything that would be holding you back from you offering me this job?
Mm.
And that means that you actually care, and you better be ready to get
Yeah,
the
yeah.
answer because you may not like it, and have an answer for it. And if you don't have an answer, say, "Okay, I want to think about that and come back to you." But
Mm.
those are some of the things that I would say you should do if you're trying to just kind of cold make your way in, because just
Mm.
submitting a resume, unless you know someone, it's not going to get you too far.
Interesting. I have a question for you because I don't know the answer to this one because it happens to me often. So we'll post a job spec at my company,
Mhm.
and in fact, in this case, it was a head of sales position, and people will email me or message me on LinkedIn and not go through the process How do you think about that? Because like it doesn't. I mean, in theory, it reports to me, but like I'm not the one posting it. There's a process. We have a
Yeah.
HR person posting the job. Is a very clear application
Yeah.
process. They try and skip the line and say maybe if I get Vinny's attention. And I can't. I like for those listening, it's very difficult when you're running an organization to take, take applications out of the process, because then the HR team is like, who is this person you're
Yeah,
interviewing? What are you doing? They haven't been vetted by other people. We haven't done testing. It's not fair to other candidates in the queue. How do you think about that?
Great question. It's if they are only going to you and not respecting and following the process, I think that's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Again, back to that attention to detail piece. If it's, hey, this is our process, we want you to submit here, you'll hear back from us in X amount of time. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, Vinny, I wanted to let you know, I submitted a resume. I'm really interested in what you guys are doing. These are the reasons why. I'd love the opportunity to speak to you. They're acknowledging your process. They're respecting your process, but candidly, they're doing what a salesperson needs to do. Like, I don't want a sales rep that somebody says, oh, we're not interested right now. And they go, okay, talk to you later. Like,
Sure.
That's not who
Yeah,
I
sure.
want to hire. I want you to find any way possible to get into an account. And so it's showing that level of, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get in. But what's really important is that they have enough social awareness to understand and respect, hey, I recognize that this is your process. I don't want to throw it out of whack. So that's, if somebody just goes to me straight and doesn't communicate the process, that's not okay with me.
Okay.
You kind of get negative points for that.
Yeah, I agree. I've always kind of been turned off by the whole thing because I'm like, well, you probably don't understand how companies work, but
Yeah.
I get the counterpoint that and I do respect the the grit and trying to get there. Okay, so next question I got for you is around structuring your team, because then it's when you're building these sales teams, how do you think about composition? Because there's things like a pre-sales person,
Sure.
then you have the sales, you have the AE, and personally, as someone who's been a buyer of tech services before, the most frustrating thing, honestly, is when you work with a team and then you sign the deal and then they hand it off to someone else. They never speak to them again. I'm like, hang on, I thought you were on this. Oh no, I'm just doing the sales. Once you're in the company, this guy will take care of you, and then they assign you someone who's just like terrible, and you're like, oh geez, So how do you structure your team, and how do you deal with the handoff between the sales team and the account management team?
Great question. I got a lot of shit from someone about this yesterday.
Yeah. So I'm not the only one.
No. And it happens
It happens a
frequently.
lot.
Frequently. There's, like you mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot of turnover with sales teams.
Exactly.
And that happens for a number of reasons. Like, maybe we don't think it's the right fit for the company. Maybe, they found a different role that they're more interested in. When people get locked into a specific sales rep that they like, they do not want to leave that sales rep.
Actually, I'll just add something to that quickly before you continue on that. One of the most important reasons why you have to make sure your contract with a company is watertight. You have to assume the person you're dealing with will not be there.
Correct.
And you got to make sure the contract is exactly what you want, because very often you're working with someone you trust, even if you've known them for years, etc. And don't worry, we'll take care of you. We'll keep giving you this, but the contract says something else. That company gets acquired, someone gets fired, department gets shut down. Any bunch of things can go right or wrong for that company, and the contract is what the deal is.
And not to sway from your original question too much, but I think one of the things I mentioned, like the detail orientation and why that's so important, is that builds trust in a way that nothing else does with somebody. Because if you're following up and saying, hey, Vinny, this is, the terms of the contract that we talked about, and you lay it out in great detail, you're like, okay, they've got it. I don't need to micromanage this situation. And that salesperson is making it easy for you to make a decision. So that's something I coach my team on a lot, of you need to have this level of detail, because it just makes someone trust you in the whole process.
Hi, this is Vinny. Thank you for being a viewer or subscriber to my channel. And if you are a viewer and not a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button. I love producing content for you guys, and I really, really appreciate all the feedback and the comments that you post. I want to hear from you about which guests you want to see on my show, and more importantly, which questions you want to ask them. I'm going to try my best to get them on just for you. Thanks so much. And now back to the show.
So going back to your original question of how do you deal with the changeover of a sales rep and a sales team, you have to look at what's best for the business long term. And I'll give you the example that I ran into the other day where I had a customer that gave me a hard time. He's like, Chelsea, it's been 5 months and I've seen 3 sales reps. I'm like, that is correct. You have. I recognize that. And I was honest with him. And I said, this isn't what I wanted to do, but candidly, I saw that the team that was in place was not going to get me to the next level with you. That's the truth. And over the last couple of months, I've tried to step in, probably not doing the same job as a sales rep. That's not my role. But I wanted to make sure that I was bridging that gap because the idea is that you're going to be a massive customer for me and I want to earn your business. So I never get too far away from the best relationships that I have. I obviously can't have a tight-knit relationship with every client that I have, but for the ones that I believe are going to bring us to the next level, it's really important for me to, maintain that because my sales rep may leave or something may happen. So it's about communication and honestly vulnerability. And I was very clear with them. I was like, I didn't feel that this was the right fit for you long term. And so I made the decision to make that change twice. And I do now feel that the person I have in place is the right person to get me to the next level. I was like, how do you feel? And he goes, I really like him. I was like, I do too. I think this is a good thing for us.
Yeah.
So I think it's just about people are really okay in a sales situation if you acknowledge what you're doing. And I acknowledge, I recognize this is frustrating. You've had conversations, they've made commitments, you've explained things, and you don't want to do that all over again. I'm going to try to ease this burden as much as I can, but I believe this is the best thing for the long term, and here's the reasons why. I think when you skirt around it and just kind of keep it a revolving door, and then you get an email and you're like, who is this? Like, I used to work with Joe. Like, who's Sarah? Yeah. That's frustrating.
Okay, so on a sales team, what do you have? What's the composition of that team?
For me today?
Yeah.
So we have a model which I enjoy, I think this works the best, where we have a sales rep that is directly paired with a sales engineer. Okay. I think that model is really strong and healthy because a lot of companies will kind of take a shortcut and have a pod or a matrix model where they're like, okay, here's an engineer that floats around.
Doesn't work.
Doesn't work. Because you have one sales rep over here who's absolutely crushing it and is monopolizing this person's time. You've got another person over here that's not getting the support that they need. And then you have a team going in. That also helps for continuity quite a bit because
they work together, they know each other, they're
a team. They're bouncing ideas off of each other. I mean, the best relationships I've had in a company, I'm working as a team. And if something happens, somebody has maternity or paternity leave or they get sick, there's the idea that you have a single point of failure in any part of your organization is a horrible idea. So more fingers on things is important. So I really like that model that we've made a commitment to. I think it scales and grows really well. I also have people based on geolocation. So sometimes people do verticals, sometimes people do, and there's a lot of reasons for that, like specializes in media and entertainment. And in my world, where we're focused on a lot of our buzz is around AI right now, really having a deep understanding of how media and entertainment works in relation to healthcare or biotech or genomics, like those are all different specialties. Yeah. So sometimes that's really important. I don't think we're quite there yet as a company. Keep in mind, we just had a raise and we're now worth just over $9 billion. So we're startup. Thank you. But we're not too small, right? Yeah. So my team is focused more geo because I want them in front of people, making relationships, having conversations, breaking bread. I think that's really important.
Okay. Let's put a pause on the tech side of things. I think a lot of people are not in the tech industry, and you were with Can doing non-tech sales. Did you start from zero at Can?
I was employee number 6.
Okay. In terms of sales, was there any sales before?
There was a little bit.
Okay.
Not much though. I actually invested in the company. Okay. So Can is a microdose THC beverage. And so
Yep.
the idea and concept behind it is it feels like a glass of wine or a beer without the harmful side effects, which is a hangover.
Yeah.
I'm not really a cannabis person, but I tasted it and I was like, this tastes amazing. And more importantly, I was running a global sales team at the time, had really long hours. Sometimes I'm talking to teams in India, sometimes it's teams in Singapore. I was missing that edge, take the edge off in the day of just, want to relax a little bit and can fit really well. And so I tried the product and I went back to my friends that had started it. I'm like, I think what you're doing is amazing. I want to invest. So that's kind of how I got in. And my friend called me a few months later and he's like, hey, now that you're an investor, we need your help. I was like, all right.
I've heard that one before.
He's like, we're having a really hard time with sales. Like things are dropping dramatically. I was like, I know absolutely nothing about CPG.
Yeah.
I know even less about cannabis. Like, I don't know how to help you. He's like, please, please, please just give us, 30 minutes a week to kind of chat through this. And so I started talking to them about just baseline things, about how they were structured, how they were working with, at the time, their distributor. And he's like, oh, our distributor, it's not working very well. I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Your distributor is an extension of your sales team. You've got a singular person on your sales team today. They've got how many? 30? Like, you can use these guys. So how about you create an incentive for them to help sell on your behalf? And they put that into place and sales started to go up. And so that's how I got into the company. And after about 9 months of that, I decided to leave Dell. I was running a global sales team for Dell, and I came on as the chief revenue officer. So that's how I got it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've just joined Can. You got a sales rep working with you, and like 20 accounts, maybe taking it 20, 30 accounts.
Not even. I mean, we had only launched in the state of California. We were just getting ramped up for Nevada.
Okay.
This was at the time where it's all hands on deck.
Okay.
Like, it is scrappy startup. I'm in giving samples out to people inside of a dispensary.
Activation.
You do whatever you can to get people interested.
Okay, so let's just frame this for the audience a bit.
Sure.
Like, this is a real world product. It's not a tech thing. You have to manufacture the drink. You have to put it into a can.
Yep.
You have to package it. You have to go have shipping, logistics providers and distributors shipping it all out. And more importantly, you have to get sales going.
Yeah.
You've got to get places that are going to store the stuff and sell it to the public, whether it's a dispensary or whatever else. I'm guessing you couldn't really sell online, right?
No, it's
okay.
illegal.
It's illegal to sell online, so you had to go through the retail sector. This story fascinated me because, when I was very young, I tried like selling to stores and, the family business, we were trying to supply food to stores and stuff. It sucks. Okay. And so getting these retail accounts is really hard. And I'm sure there are a ton of entrepreneurs out there, whether they're making, wax candles or any other packaged goods. I've seen like chia seed packets that a friend started to produce and sell in stores. Like, it's a tough business no matter what it is, and now it's even tougher because it's cannabis related.
Yeah.
How did you go out, like practically? How did you go out and build a sales funnel and grow Can to what it is today?
Yeah, and we also had the extra layer, without getting deep on the cannabis piece, of we were trying to sell a microdose to people that want absolutely nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
So it's like, in a way, trying to sell ice to Eskimos situation. They were just like, we want nothing to do with this. So it is physically exhausting. That was the biggest difference. I had never done anything like that. I had never done direct to consumer. I had never done CPG. I had always done large form enterprise business. And so this is a grind in a different way. You are physically on the road knocking on doors, and it is over and over and over and over.
Do you set up appointments or you just go up to them?
You do it all.
Okay.
You set up appointments, you hunt people down in a parking lot, you find them on LinkedIn, you know their picture, and you've gone on Facebook and you've figured out what they look like.
Stalker mode.
I've literally done
activated.
it. I had a sales rep one time that we were really trying to get into this account, and she sat outside the account's door because they wouldn't meet with her, and she had a box of cupcakes with her face on them. And it worked. Like you have to do things that are in any type of sales that are outside the box and unique to get people to remember you.
Why is that? Do you think people like the idea that it's different, it's creative?
Yeah, you're trying. Like
Yeah.
if you're just doing the same old thing where you're walking in and you ask for someone and you leave your business card, somebody's going to get that and just like throw it away.
It's like I've seen 100 of these. I don't need another one.
And there's also there is a psychology behind if you give somebody something, the expectation is that they owe you something in return.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you get the stamps or the address labels in the mail. There was like a whole study behind that you get that and then you're like, oh, I have to donate to this company. I think that's dying off a little bit, but I mean, we were talking about it earlier. How many people message you and DM you on
every day,
every platform,
every platform?
And why? Who are the people that you respond to and why? It's either status, right? Well-known name. And so for where we were in the stage of the company, we didn't have those things.
Or mutual introduction, actually.
Sure.
One of the things people don't appreciate, and I see this a lot, is like I have a spam filter on my Instagram, my LinkedIn, whatever. A lot of time these messages pile into it.
You don't get it.
And like I don't have time to go check who's legit. So when people message me and they don't get a reply, it's because it's gone through the spam filter. It's a lot easier if it was a thread that a mutual friend created or pinged me about. And so that warm introduction is helpful. But in sales, it's not always possible because you're going into categories and sectors where you just don't know anyone who knows anyone. I mean, it's surprising when in the tech world, if I go into LinkedIn, I type in pretty much any CEO in the Bay Area, because I lived there for 10 years. I've been in tech for a long time. They're at least a second connection or a third for me. Never more than that. And if someone's like a more than that, then they're probably not a legit tech guy, right? But if I go into another category like CPG, I have no connections.
Sure.
That's what I did. It's a big world. You go there, I'm like, oh, you mean I know no one who knows this person, or even 2 or 3 degrees away?
Yeah,
it's kind of crazy. So then you have to roll up your sleeves and knock on doors.
And sometimes it's not the people you think too. You forget about the gatekeepers.
Yeah.
You walk in, and I mean, secretaries are far and few between these days, but there's somebody that's there and greeting you. They may not be getting the treats dropped off by somebody else. So you make friends with them and you strike up a conversation. You're like, hey, do you know when they're back? And they're like, well, they only take meetings on Thursdays after 3. And you're like, okay, great.
Yeah.
So if I come back on Thursday after 3, like I have a better shot. Yeah. You probably have a better shot.
That's happened to me before as well. I had my assistant. There's a guy who's actually, I think he had like $1 billion exit or something a few years ago, but like 20 years ago he was this young kid and he really looked up to me, and he became friendly with my assistant, and eventually she snuck a coffee onto my calendar with him many years ago. And I met with him and get to know him, and it was helpful. Eventually I wound up investing in his company at some point on the line, but years later. But it was that sort of grit and determination
that you probably took the meeting.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't even know I was taking a meeting.
Yeah. But even if your assistant came to you and said, hey, Vinny, like, I've been talking to this guy a while, like.
I think she probably did. I just don't remember it. But like.
Then you'd be more open to it.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was, it's like who are the gatekeepers, right? And that applies to sales and business and in general. I mean, even for me right now, like to get to certain people in the world, if I wanted to, there's certain people I'd have to go and chat to. Like I wouldn't go and.
Do you want to use that relationship?
Exactly. And I have to. If I had something important, sure, I wouldn't do it for like. I want to go just hang out and take a selfie. If it was important, I could do it. But it's the same process, right? That person doesn't know me, but maybe someone I know knows someone who's a gatekeeper to them, and it basically applies to most people. But again, very interesting that that's the way you do it in sales, because it's true. That's how the world works.
And it's paying attention to like little things. Do they have interesting sneakers on? Do they have a wedding ring on?
Yeah.
Ask them if they're married. I've literally seen dog hair on somebody before. I'm like, do you have a dog? People love talking about their pets. You get down to what they're interested in, and you don't make it about what you are trying to get. And you want to see a picture of my dog? Like, I want to show people a picture of my dog.
I want to kidnap your dog.
No.
You got the cutest dog in the world.
Thank you.
But yeah, no, you're right. The personal side of it is actually what gets some, at least gets your foot in the door,
Hmm.
and then you still have to win it on the basis of product.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting is different parts of the world they take sales different sales approaches.
Hmm.
So America, having lived here for long enough now, 16 years, it's very direct, in your face.
Depends on what part of the country, but
But
yes.
most of the time, for the most part, I mean,
Yeah.
the tech is a little different, but a lot of it's just sales, account management, etc. Other parts of the world, it's a very slow sales cycle.
Sure.
I mean, the US,
Asian countries specifically.
US, you can ramp up sales from a couple $1 million or 10 to 100 very quickly. Other parts of the world, if you're a startup getting started, it's all about who your shareholders are, your investors are, who knows who. It's very relationship driven. And you know what I think is interesting about that is America is really a far more meritocratic society when it comes to growing by sales than other countries are. And you have this like incumbency, or you have this sort of aristocracy that forms in foreign countries. And when you try and get into sales, you either have to partner with someone who's high up the chain, give them a share in your business, set up a separate company where they own a piece of it. It's very weird because it basically it doesn't allow people who are just smart and competent and hardworking to move up easily. That this upward mobility is not there because the powers that be in those countries kind of keep a lockdown on who gets money and who gets to choose in the marketplace. And that's why often the products and services you find on the shelves or wherever it is in foreign countries is not that good because it wasn't about the best product getting on the shelf. It's about who knows who.
Well, and there's also the cultural piece too, right? Of you have to go within their timelines and the process behind it, and you have to respect that. And that's a big piece of it too. Of just like I've been lucky enough to have the opportunity to do business globally, and it's different, and you have to adapt and change to it.
Yeah. And you have to understand the cultures and hire local people as well. It's very hard to break into I mean, and I've done business across the world in previous companies and current companies. And if you want to scale in a market, almost invariably you have to set up operations in that market.
People like to buy local because it goes back to that trust piece. You know, they have people, like the day old thing is people say people buy from people they like and trust. But there's another piece and layer to that, I believe, where it's what makes them feel comfortable. And talking to someone that has a different background and a different culture from them, it may not make them feel like bad necessarily, but uncomfortable. And so if you have somebody locally that can speak in their language and knows, like, I don't know, their cultural norms, that makes it easier for them to break in, I think.
Speaking of cultural norms, let's get into the biases that you encounter.
Sure.
So you've had a number of corporate jobs in America, startup world. What's it like being, someone who's extremely talented, young and female in a world which is just, I would say the average counterpart for you would not be, someone who looks and sounds and acts like you.
That's correct. It's evolved over time. When I first got into this industry, I was very young. I was 21. And I also had the age piece running against me and working in a predominantly male-dominated industry. And that's still the case today. I am the only female sales leader in my company. What's
the average age around you?
In terms of my peers or people that work for me?
People work for you.
All over the map. So that's in people that I've hired.
Okay.
And honestly, that's kind of the way I've learned over time. That's how I've chosen to do business. Like, I do think diversity is the right way to go. It's right person for the job.
Yes.
But I like the idea of I've got someone on my team that's 26, and I've got people that are in their late 50s, early 60s on my team too. And I've managed kind of all in those different, and I've worked for people kind of up and down the stack. I've only worked for someone I've never worked for someone that's younger than me, but I have worked for someone that was the same age as me. And ironically, I had this perspective, like I had a bias. I was like, how is she going to be able to teach me anything? Which was totally wrong.
Yeah.
Because I learned a lot from her. And I think a lot of the way I've chosen to be a leader is what I directly learned from her. So I'm sorry, your original question was?
Well, just talk about some of the biases you've encountered, and how has it affected your ability to execute your job?
Yeah, I mean, specifically, I had been working for EMC for a number of years. I was the top sales rep in the Western United States. I had gotten an award for it that previous year. I closed a deal that the company had previously done like $25,000 with us, and I closed a $45 million deal in the span of 18 months. I was very well respected by my peers, my leadership, and there was a job that opened up that I really wanted, and it was to run a global sales team, and I was an internal candidate for it. So I was like, okay, this probably gives me a little bit of an edge. Like, you can go to 100 references that can tell you who I am, what I do, why I'm a good fit for this job. And I had a lot of support from my existing leadership to take the job too. And I had 27 interviews for this job. And they were not sure I was the right one because I was too young.
You interviewed 27.
That's correct.
With 27 different people.
Some of them were repeat, but internal, same company, 27 times.
Wait, so you're already working there?
Yes, it was Dell at the time.
Okay, cool. So
it was another role.
But 27?
27 times.
Wow. I would have stopped counting at 5.
Yeah. I started to get frustrated because it kept going for so long, and I knew I was internal. I knew they were interviewing other people and they kept disqualifying them. And I'm like, what am I missing here? Like, I have the track record. I have the experience. Why am I not getting this opportunity? And I was frustrated by it. And honestly, when she offered me the job, what I said to her was, I'm not sure that I want to work for somebody that doesn't really want me to work for them.
Wow.
I need to think about it.
Wow.
That didn't go over so well.
So what happened?
I took the job.
Okay.
I was down between 2 different jobs and I was torn. I was like, this other person
loved you, wanted you, open arms.
Who happens to be my boss now, ironically, loved me, wanted me to take this job. He had been a mentor for me, super supportive of me. And the other job was more appealing to me. And I was really apprehensive at the time to work for this woman because I'm like, I want to work for somebody that believes in me. That was really important to me at the time. And I think looking back at it now, I think she pressured me for the right reasons. And her primary reason behind it was, are you really ready to step out of the spotlight? I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, when you go from being an individual contributor to somebody that's leading a team, it's no longer about you anymore. And I never really thought about that. But, I'm in an interview. I'm like, yes, of course I'm ready to do this. And in the back of my head, I'm like, am I ready to do this? Am I ready to deal with other people's shit, and complaining?
Excuses.
Yeah, it's exhausting. Being a sales leader is exhausting. And I took the job and I learned a lot from her. And she was a female that was in tech much longer than I was and had to go through a lot of the same, troubles about being a woman. And I learned a lot from her because of that. And I think she saw something that I didn't see. So I think her questioning me was accurate. 27 interviews was a little intense, but it all worked out for the best.
That's awesome. Can you give me I'd love to just know what are the top 2 or 3 lessons or things she taught you? You can share.
As soon as you ask that, I can hear her voice in my head. And I don't remember the specific thing that happened, but I was really upset about something that went sideways. And she said, she's the only person on the planet that calls me Chelsea. She said, Chelsea, there's no right or wrong, just learn. And I was like, and she was like, sit with that for a second. And I was so focused on what I did wrong. And she's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what was right, what was wrong. Just use this as a building block of how you do things differently in the future. I was like, all right. And I think about that often. The other thing that she taught me is it was a little buzz thing that she did. And when somebody would come, because it was the first time I was really managing a team, and it was hard. So, back to I'm managing men, women that are older, younger, the whole gamut in age from me. And I had trouble with some of them, and they just either weren't listening to me or weren't respecting me. And looking back on it, I think it was a skills gap a little bit that I was too immature at the time to be able to help fix. But when they would come to me with problems, which, you've, I'm sure, had this, like people come to you and they're like, I have this problem and and I need you to fix it. And she would always go, it's an interesting thing you bring up. I look forward to seeing how you figure out how to fix that. And she just did it in this really calm way that it wasn't demeaning. It would just push it back on them to come back to me with a solution on it. Yeah. And I think that's really important is if you're always being the super rep, which I was very conditioned to be, that doesn't scale. That doesn't scale as a sales rep. That doesn't scale as a sales team. That doesn't scale as a business owner. You get stuck. And so you have to be able to figure out how to get people to the next level and push it back on them of, no right or wrong, just learn. How do you get to the next level?
That's great. It's great advice. For sales and other things in life, just I think part of grit and perseverance in business, in sales is just the willingness to accept that you make mistakes and just learn and iterate and just keep moving forward. It's kind of like momentum.
Yeah.
Equals, grit multiplied by perseverance. And you just keep going, Okay. So if you could give some advice to your 25-year-old self, what would it be?
I think it would be, don't get so caught up in the, I want to say detail, but I used to get very concerned about what other people thought about me. And the reality is, number one, it doesn't really matter. As long as you're doing what you feel is right and you're doing what's right on behalf of the company and right on behalf of your morals, but worrying about what other people thought you were capable of, I think that was really a roadblock for me. It's like, well, they don't think I'm capable of it, so am I capable of it? Doesn't matter. There's.
But how did you work through that? Because I guess it's easy in retrospect to.
It is easy in retrospect.
How did you actually get through that blocker? Because it's a blocker, and everyone has these type of blockers in life.
So it kind of goes back to what I said at the beginning, where I got stuck given the accounts that nobody wanted. The ones that were disasters, the ones that, watch out for this guy. He's really tough to deal with. And that was all I had. So it was either I work to make this work or I leave. And failure for me at the time, quitting was not an option.
Quitting should never be an option.
No, and it shouldn't. And
failing is fine. Quitting's not.
So getting through to those difficult people, that I've had people look at me straight in the eye and I've walked in, they're like, it's a disaster. Your company has brought us down. We, lost so much money. We spent money on this and you didn't deliver on anything that you said. And, I don't care. Anything that you say to me right now doesn't matter. I still hate XYZ company. And it's like, okay, I hear you. I want to see what I can do to make that better. Like, can I try? And everyone says yes to that. They're like, yeah, sure, whatever. You can try. And I think when you start to put the effort in and make the change for people, 90% of the time what ends up happening is people come back to me and they're like, really sorry, I gave you a hard time about that. I shouldn't have been so hard on you. I really appreciate what you've done. Like, we've made a big change. And the best relationships I have are with companies or accounts or whatever you want to call it, where something blew up and you fix it. Because that's a lot harder to do than to just walk in and have, a bluebird fall out of the sky.
When do you think is the right time to hire the first salesperson as a founder? So if you're running a company, you're building a product, you're kind of trying to get traction for it. Often, you think that you need to hire sales prematurely and the product's not ready. And the most successful businesses I've seen built are ones where you delay the hiring of the salesperson as long as possible. for the founders to do the sales in the beginning. But at some point, that just doesn't become practical because often it's just not their skill set and they don't know how to sell. So how do you think about that?
Well, that was exactly, I was going to turn that question back around you and said, okay, of all those people that you've said that are the most successful, how many of those people are innately salespeople? Because I think there are some things that people pick up on, and it's just the natural connection piece. And there's some people that are super introverted, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's difficult to get a sale done. So if you have a real blind spot on that and you're a bull in the china shop and people are getting frustrated with you and they're not listening to you and you're talking over them, I've seen this a lot, you're not the right person to be selling your product. And so I would say you have to do that sooner. Hopefully that isn't who you are. And I think I agree with you. A lot of the companies that end up making it are the founders that have that skill set. I mean, as an example, they were saying to me, like, we don't know how to sell. That's not true. The two guys, Jake and Luke, that started Can, absolutely know how to sell, have raised a ton of money that is selling. They made it pretty far, but they didn't know the structural organization. And that's where you maybe want to bring in somebody that understands, like, okay, how do you build and scale this beyond your capabilities now? So when you do feel like you're reaching your limits where you're losing deals. So, and this goes for a company that is in business, doing a ton of revenue now, or just getting off the ground. If you are not losing deals, then you are not in enough deals, period. So when you get to a point that you're losing deals, you have to look back and say, okay, why am I losing deals? Is there problems with the product? Is there problems with our services? Is there problems with the way that we're delivering this? Or do I just not have the bandwidth? And if it's a bandwidth issue, that's when you have to hire someone.
Okay. Where do you learn all this stuff from? I mean, I know some of it's on the job, but like, who do you follow online? Who do you recommend people? If someone's really trying to get into the sales category in particular, or you're trying to grow your business, who do you recommend they follow?
Honestly, there's no one that jumps out to me.
Okay.
I would say it's more people I've met within the industry. A lot of customers I've learned a lot from. There's one person in particular that comes to mind. I've sold to him at 2 different companies. He's become a friend. And we got to the level where I would ask for feedback. And I think you should always ask for feedback. I don't think I did that early enough. And people like hearing that. So I couldn't say, like, okay, go to this resource online, but constantly ask for feedback. What could I have done differently? You lose a deal, don't walk away. What could I have done differently to win this deal? Because they may say to you, we just don't feel like your product's ready yet. Okay, well, sounds like you need to go do some development. And I think you should ask them to be brutally honest. And if you think it's something about the way you're approaching it, bring it up. Hey, I have a tendency, I think vulnerability is big. Like, I have a tendency to come across a little too strong. Was that off-putting? Is there something I could have been doing differently? So I think asking for feedback like that is really important. And if you're hearing it directly from customers, those are the people you're trying to sell to.
Yeah, it reminds me of a company I had a few companies ago called Gift, and we had this delete your account feature or button. So you go into your settings, you delete your account. But in order to delete your account, we forced you to tell us why are you deleting your account, what's wrong. Just tell us in like a few words. And most people would just like put in,
I don't want to pay for it anymore.
It was a free account as well. So it was just,
that's right.
So there was no cost to having it, but people just didn't want to have an account anymore. And in the beginning, we got a lot of requests to delete the account. They didn't see value in it. And we asked them questions. The amount of great product development ideas we got out of there, we could actually track on a metric basis, like how, as a percentage of new accounts, how fewer and fewer were deleting accounts because we were solving their problems. Like one issue was like, I can't track where my cards are. And then we built a tracking system and I can't do, this and that. And the amount of product info you get out of people who are, like call it your dissenters, people who just, they don't want your product.
The naysayers,
The naysayers. Maybe they thought they did and they realized it's not what they expected. But that's the most valuable type of information you can get.
I completely agree. And I think it's a vulnerability piece that's so hard to pick at because that was your baby.
Yeah.
And so you're literally asking people, what is ugly about my baby.
Yeah.
And for a salesperson, what did I do wrong? Like you got to be ready to hear that.
Yeah. I when I look at product development, I look at, it's why do people leave and why do people stay?
Yes.
And
the other thing too is, would you recommend us to a friend?
Net Promoter Score.
Yeah.
And for those of you watching, just Google it. There's lots of ways to do this testing. And I think we got our NPS over 70 at one point, which is fantastic. So you want to have a high Net Promoter Score for your product. And companies that can get high NPSs, they become rocket ships.
Well, then you have your external selling force that's happening all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, every time you and I are with each other, I'm ordering something that you've recommended. So
exactly. Usually supplements, right?
Yeah.
Well, Charles, thanks so much for being here. This has been great. Anything else you want to leave the audience with? I guess if people are trying to really, develop themselves further, and it's challenging in the workplace. I think, the economy right now is kind of, difficult. People are tightening up budgets. What would your words of encouragement be to them if they really are just trying to get their sales going, grow their businesses, and things are sluggish?
Start talking, ask people for input. So look up to people that you admire. Maybe they're people that are close to you. Ask them for feedback. And I think it starts to tell you a lot about if you're on the right path or not. People that are close to you, like, do you think this is what I should be doing? Why or why not? People that are a little bit farther away from you that have done what you're trying to do before. Ask them, can I just have my favorite line to give people? I didn't realize I was doing it for years until one of my bosses said it. She's like, do you know you do this all the time? I'm like, can I pick your brain? People love that. People love to feel like you're picking them brain. So ask somebody that you respect, can I pick your brain about what I'm trying to do? And it helps you understand whether or not you're on the right path. And candidly, as someone that's been through burnout, if you feel yourself getting to that point, or you feel like you're losing the magic in it a little bit, or you're not learning, it's time to pivot. Yeah. And that doesn't mean it's over. Yeah. It just means it's something different.
Do something different for a while and re-energize yourself.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Charles.
Thanks, Vin.